Good morning, everybody. It's Dan Bossi and Ben Buckner back with you. It's the 13th of November, Thursday, right ahead of the USDA crop report, which will be out tomorrow. Now, we are getting some news out of Europe. The EUDR, if you will, or that deforestation law, looks like it'll be pushed back to sometime next week. They have been unable to get a vote, but at a minimum, the proposals have been to delay it for another year. So I think as you think about what's going to be coming, we can think about that rule being delayed well into the end of 2026, as they're suggesting December 30th. Other news is relatively lacking, other than the U.S. government back at work. We're going to start getting statistical information again. There will be data dumps. And so I do believe that some of the rally in the markets, at least yesterday and today, is because of the reopening. That data dump is got the shorts on the run. They're a little concerned. And with that, the market's been pushing higher. The corn is back against a 200-day moving average at 436 relative to December. And the soybean market has rallied to fill, or nearly rallied to fill, a chart gap that's somewhere in the vicinity of November beans, looking up into that 1130 to 1140 mark. So Ben, kind of take us forward. We got a big report tomorrow. That report is going to be directionally important. What do you think?
Yeah, let's see how the markets react to it, I think, of course, is the big deal. And we've got also the FAS website telling us November 20th will be the next export sales report. So that'll be, I think, hugely important next Thursday. So a lot to digest. I just wanted to go in briefly to talk about what I think USDA will print tomorrow in their balance sheets and kind of measuring that against potential reactions if we isolate kind of the algorithm-based traders. And so what we have been able to see is, of course, physical shipments of everything. And I wanted to highlight soybeans just because, of course, through at least November 6th, we really didn't see any change. It's been pretty dull and pretty lackluster compared to USDA's current forecast. So I wanted to show this graphic, which I think is pretty handy. This charts cumulative FGIS shipments against annual exports, or in the case of the red line that you see, the USDA's forecast. And we're out of the range. And so historically, that means the USDA has got to make a move. If we just push this last red dot into the 10-year range, USDA mathematically probably lowers annual soybean exports 75 or 100 million bushels. And then we'll see once we get this new data, export sales, especially, if it doesn't change in the next 30 days, there's certainly room for deeper cuts. But I think that is, I just wanted to highlight that, pace analysis is what it is. If we ignore, these framework deals with a lot of countries, we just haven't seen it show up in physical shipments. So I think that is a risk tomorrow. Corn yield, let's call it 183, 182, something like that. But this is what I think the U.S. corn balance sheet is going to look like tomorrow. They have been actively changing acreage, and we think their silage acreage just mathematically is a little too low. That will raise grain harbs to corn area. But of course, we know they're going to add to beginning stocks 1.5 billion bushels. And most likely, we have seen this historically going back decades. Whatever happens in old crop feed and residual use, a similar change is made in the new crop balance sheet. Not to the same intensity, but I do think they will lower feed and residual by 200 million bushels. I think that's fair. So we're kind of left with, and again, almost any yield scenario, something like 2.0, 2.3 billion bushel in stocks. I just don't think this is going to grab a lot of attention. Corn market adequate, oversupplied, just very, very dull. Charts are doing what they're doing, but I do think that the USDA's balance sheet in tomorrow's report will be pretty uneventful relative to what it looked like in September. And soybeans, a couple of things. One, again, I think we're assuming, based on pace analysis, exports get trimmed about 100 million bushels. And yield, we've done as much work as we possibly can, not having USDA's October report and objective yield data. But test plot analysis has performed really, really well, kind of nationwide. So I don't think that suggests there's a lot of room to go down in soybean yields. I just wanted to reiterate the USDA's protocol. So we know that they're using, or in September, we're using a pod weight unchanged from last year. And last year was probably hotter and drier in August, September. So I think that's probably locked in. Pod counts are going to be the thing that keeps this thing pretty elevated. And also, we've seen from September to January every year, NASS, for whatever reason, raises their pod count number during that 4-month span. So if you have really no issues with pod weight, and typically they add to pod counts, is the risk you have a slightly higher soybean yield tomorrow. let's assume 53.1 lower exports and ending stocks get placed at about 350 million bushels. So that does not reflect oversupply yet, but the change I think is important. So I know there are a lot of wide-ranging stocks estimates tomorrow, but I think that is what we think will happen. Again, just based on the pace of physical soybean exports to date. And kind of lastly, I think the again charts are doing what they're doing. We welcome rallies. There may be room for some more upside, but to us, it's the concern is just the Brazilian soybean market's still cheap, still abundant. They're still exporting lots of soybeans. Harvest in Mato Grosso starts in 60 or less days, and so that is different than last year. Again, by February 1st, they probably have something like 20 million tons of soybeans in Mato Grosso alone, and that's just par for the course, normal crop progress, and we've seen that develop through planting dates so far. This is what the weather pattern looks like. Some abnormal dryness, northeast Brazil, that gets solved next week. All of South America will be pretty well watered. And still what jumps out to me is Argentina, this perhaps potential La Nina-based dryness. It doesn't really show up. So we're also getting pretty close to the early stages of corn pollinating, that early planted corn in Argentina, and so no weather issues to speak of. So we're going to be prepared. I think we will all measure tomorrow's reaction to the report, but be ready perhaps to make some moves if you don't have South American weather. And again, it's not even just that we'll revisit weather and yield every week in the month of December, but just know that there is going to be harvest starting in Brazil in 2 months or less.
Well, Ben, it's going to be good to get back with data again. That's what I'm looking forward to tomorrow, because we've been sitting for 6 weeks kind of in the dark, and charts have been the leaders here. But I also want to mention still no Chinese demand this morning. So every morning I wake up and I hope that the Chinese buy U.S. soybeans. They may have cargo of U.S. sorghum yesterday, but I can't find any beans. So, again, one of these problems that the further we go out in time, the more narrow the window gets. If we were to load soybeans today for China, I don't think we'd get them out until the last 10 days of December. So between that and what you say in Mato Grosso and soybeans, that window's getting very tight for the United States to get a lot of beans out the door. Any final questions or comments from you?
I don't think so. No, yeah, we're all very excited. It is going to be intense digesting tomorrow, because they will incorporate what they know of what we sold, shipped, et cetera, objective yield data. So the snapshot will be very good. It will give us a lot, but I think to just digest it's going to be pretty tough. World balance sheets, U.S. soybean exports, what they choose to do with that's going to be very, very interesting.
Looking forward to get back into the world of data again, everyone. Be well on this Thursday. We will be back tomorrow to talk a little bit more about the crop report if the market offers opportunity. Have a good day trading, and be well on Thursday. Goodbye, everyone.